All right, welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name is Joe Augustin, and currently missing on screen is Tim Wade. And we want to welcome you to a show that tries to encourage people to think, and not just to push you along that way. We try to arm you with some information as well that can help the process. So hopefully that's having some sort of result with you. And if you'd like to share this with your friends, please do that now. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And look, last week we had some really great conversation going on Facebook, which wasn't appearing on our screen in the comments through StreamYard. So I'm going to try and track it on my phone, but it's hard to do this and that at the same time. So hopefully if you can sign into StreamYard, we'll be able to see your comments as they come through live. But you have to log in so we can know actually who you are commenting. So that was something that was going on last week. So we love the comments, even if we see them after the fact. In fact, we just got our first comment. Who is it? Yo. And I don't know who it is because it just says Facebook user. But anyway, yo back.
So on the show, what we like to do is also invite a guest to join us, someone to make things a little spicy, I guess. It's just the three of us. We're a mild curry, but I think today we're going to take ourselves to the upper limit of things. Our guest today is a marketer, a creative thinker, and if you ever need one, a James Bond villain. He's one of our favorites. He's got a fantastic laugh. Would you please welcome Pravin Shekar to the mix?
Love you guys. Thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you, especially the theme that we're going to be doing, skilling and employing people with disabilities. I'm really excited to talk about that because I know you're doing some awesome work. So
now, I know the introduction that I gave to you wasn't a complete one because you've done a lot more as well. All those books behind you, some of them are yours.
Yes, they are, Joe. I do a bunch of things. At my heart, my purpose is to inspire creators. And I do that through talks, books, and investing in companies. I call myself a parallel entrepreneur because at this point, I've got 3 companies running. And by this year end, I'll have 5 running with me participating in one way or the other. I'm a professional speaker speaking on outlier, unconventional marketing. And come April, I will be speaking at the South Africa Annual Convention. That will be my 28th country that I'll be speaking in. So that's what I do. And I live in India, in Chennai, by the beach with my wife and 2 girls. And my wife and I are partners in life as well as in business. So I'm kept in check everywhere. And she's my constant supporter. And that's who I am. My job, my purpose is to inspire creators using whatever I have, I can get my hands on, including the No Show.
And I'm hoping that amongst the businesses you have invested in, one of them is a bar called the Handlebar.
No, but one of my books coming out later this year or next year is going to be Mustache Maintenance and the Art of Marketing. It's obviously a take on the Zen book, but hey, why not?
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
One of the things that I love about what you do, besides your personality and your sparkling nature, is actually what you've done with your kid. In terms of modeling, in terms of what she's done as well. Because she, as young as she is, how old is she right now?
My younger one is 15 right now, and she's coming out with her 5th book. It's in the family because my elder one also came out with one last year. Where she shared her design. But then, hey, I do not believe in the regular school system. What can they learn outside? What can they do? Where is their passion? What do they want to do? Because I firmly believe, and I keep telling, that what you study in college is completely different from what you're going to do in real life. It may so happen for 2, 3, 4%, it may be the same, but for the rest, it's going to be different. And passion at this age changes, Joe. So our job is just to nudge and support.
It's a view that's often shared but not often lived out, and I want to commend you for doing that. So the format of the show is one where we try to talk a little bit about the news that's going on as well as talk to our guest about the theme today. So we've got lots of ground to cover today because we base this off of Andrea's collection of reads for the weekend. And it's a particularly long list this weekend.
Yes. It is.
It is. Yeah.
There's a lot going on in the world at the moment, and we saw it last week and this week as well. And it's hard to pick. I try to be representative of all over the world, but also media sources from. I don't want to just be one sort of approach. Left is my obviously inclination, but I want to give the whole sort of view. So it's hard, and there's always ones we never mention because I put too many in. But should we get stuck in?
Yeah, let's get on to it.
All right. So I thought we could start with something a little bit lighthearted. I like to do that, as you guys know. And we're going to start in New Zealand. So there's hundreds of protests outside of New Zealand Parliament, and their strategy has been to play Barry Manilow's music on a 15-minute loop, as well as the Spanish tune, the Macarena. Now, I don't know about you, but the Macarena would be enough to get me out of that place. But when that didn't work, they've now introduced James Blunt and Baby Shark. So this is all to stop the mandate protesters. And just remember with these, they're inspired by the Canadian protesters. And I'm not going to talk about that now, but it looks like the leaders of that protest are being arrested in Canada at the moment. But we have the right to protest, but it's still hundreds, right? From a percentage of the global population or the national population, it's still a small, tiny percentage. But the big news this week, of course, is the Ukraine. Did you guys have a chance to read some of the stuff I sent through?
Yes. Yeah.
Had a peek at it. I must say I didn't delve deep.
I might have overwhelmed you guys with stuff on that one, but but there's been a lot of stuff going on, and we haven't really gone deep into the Ukraine so far. And I thought it was based on what was happening this week, it was the right week to do. So we kicked off the week where dozens of nations told their citizens to leave the Ukraine, and then there was an article in the New York Times that was basically talking about how the US is battling Putin by disclosing his next possible moves. They hope, and this is a different sort of strategy for them, but by disclosing the plans, it's going to disrupt them, potentially delay the invasion, and maybe even buy more time for diplomacy. So some of the things that they've unveiled, first of all, was the movement of Russian special operation forces to the border. Then they exposed a Russian plan to create a video of a fake atrocity, which we've seen that before. They've outlined Moscow's war plans. They've talked about the cost of an invasion with thousands and thousands of deaths. I mean, it really is going to be one of those wars where no one really wins. And also, they've also talked about Putin's not as in a stronger position within the country as he sort of portrays to the world. Again, this is just the Western perspective. So we've been seeing, a lot of escalation. Russia talked about taking troops away from the border. The Europeans and the Americans have said that hasn't happened. And they signaled that an invasion could begin as early as Wednesday gone. So that didn't happen. But then another article, and it's in a publication called the Robert Lansing Institute. And the title is, Russia's leader is paving the way for domestic elites to shift power when the time is right. When you look at my weekend reads, this is a very poorly written article. I want to give a heads up on that. But it's showing that Putin has signs of a personality disorder. And basically the talks with Macron, where did you see the image where they're sitting at the end of a really, really long table at each end? And apparently because...
Putin, yes, that did the rounds.
Yeah. It's kind of a bizarre photo, but apparently it's because Putin's really, really paranoid about getting COVID. Anyway, so basically they've drawn these conclusions that his mental sanity is being challenged. And so, in the last 3 years, he's sort of gone down as far as his mental health goes, and he has a toxic desire to retain power, and it's degrading his mental state. So there's a few articles in my weekend reads where I talk about that. Did you guys have a chance to read any of them? Because it's obviously, that's a tactic.
I did.
What did you think?
That we never learn from history.
Yes.
That we do not, because what's happening before, how many times have we seen it across the globe, Andrea?
No,
But we do not. We want to wait and hope that things would work out, and we'll give it a little bit more time, give the benefit of doubt across. But we've seen this happen over and over and over again. And it's going to
Yeah.
continue because we refuse to learn from history. And I will, of course, reconnect back on this when we talk about the environment. But that is my take on it, that
Yeah.
when somebody's in a power grab or a dictatorial mode, the minor successes kind of cloud everything else. And I'm, of course, only talking from what the Western narrative has written about. I do not know much on what's happening on the other side. But that is my assessment on what is going on, that quite a lot of work needs to be done to diffuse across. Else we just have yet another disaster sitting on our hand, and the whole world is going to get affected, and we are not yet out of COVID. So there's something else that's coming in. Oh boy, it's going to suck each one of us right into it.
Yeah.
Well, assuming that he is the madman who is on the rise, I think we tend to have a little bit of a standoffish or let's wait and see, a hands-offish approach to other people's business. Except that these people have access to the nuclear codes on the other side of the fence. I don't know, man. I think what we've become is too tolerant, and I know that's kind of a strange kind of an idea to talk about, but we've actually come to the point now. I think it's in terms of human evolution, where we're letting people who would have perhaps been cleared out by the natural course of selection to carry on, right? So I was talking about all these, like people who show signs of, and with keeping in mind that this is somewhat controversial to say as well, but when people show signs, it used to be people would be either exiled or marginalized, and I don't think we do perhaps enough of that, and it's a I don't know if it's. I mean, actually, you know what? I think of it as a slippery slope. If we start trying to filter off and look out for trouble early on, we're going to end up getting some false positives. But we may, in the process, if we consider doing something like that, avoid a positive Putin.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because Putin's about to enter into his next 6 years of power. So they've changed the constitution so that he could basically stay in power. I think you're making, it's a delicate point, but it
is.
What I was thinking about today was, is there like when you think about it, you should never think it out loud, no, say it out loud. And if I was in government, I shouldn't say this, but is there a case for an assassination of some sort? I mean, that's the kind of question that you sometimes ask yourself, because like if someone is causing all this much trouble, and they're not even there on a, like in terms of what we seem to understand from how the elections have been run and how it's been basically manipulated all the way. Is there some kind of trigger where we go like, what, it's time to hit the eject button? And if only there was some way that could happen. It's almost like if we could have Facebook for world leaders, and if enough people said, dislike, we remove them. I mean, I'd be open to much more humane ways to get rid of world leaders that don't live up to the global social standards. But I don't know. I think there's something to think about there. Isn't like it's terrible that we come to a place where I'm thinking that assassination might not be a bad thing.
One article, the news article, did allude to perhaps a fear, but I would first delve into something my history teacher taught me in 7th grade, which still stands by, that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So this is not the money corruption, but it is the aura of power, that immunity and whatever you call it. But one of the news articles spoke about the paranoia that some dictators have, especially after what happened to Gaddafi and Mussolini and Ceausescu. All of them were shot in a ditch or left around. So perhaps it is also holding on to power, therefore feeding that ego to get more power, whichever way it comes through, with smaller incursions leading to larger incursions. It is always worrisome. And then connecting it back to what Joe said earlier, are we being too accommodating here? By we, I mean the entire world here, but of course, the two parties who are immediately concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the Assassin's Guild is the answer, but it's certainly a thought I've had. Let's just take them all out. But I think we're at a point in the world where we should be limiting the age of leadership, in especially in politics, because the future is not going to impact people 62 and over, right? They're not going to see the worst of what's coming from a climate crisis perspective. So why don't we limit leadership roles to 55? And once you hit 55, you're no longer relevant. So move aside and let somebody else in. But greed and power, right? That's the problem that's keeping the world where it is. But another article that I thought was really interesting, its title is "We Spoke to 7 ex-CIA and Pentagon experts. Here's what they say Putin wants in the Ukraine." Because for me, the conversation that's been happening is why, and there's so many different perspectives. And of course, we're not getting the Russian language versions of that. We're only getting the English versions of that. Well, I am, because that's all I can read. But obviously the Europeans and the US, they're doing all they can from a diplomatic perspective. But what these guys are saying is some are basically, he's just looking for regional dominance or power. And if you're not someone that craves power, it can be a difficult idea to understand why anyone would want that. So others think he's has a desire to recapture territory lost since the Cold War, or to basically recreate the Russian Empire, which is a possibility. Others are looking at it as a response to his fears, whether they're rational or not, on NATO encroachment. And obviously NATO keeps coming up. And the other one is his fear of being toppled in a popular revolution that could lead a trip to the gallows, right? But one of the comments that I liked is he reminds me of the Roman Emperor Justinian. So in going back to your history, Pravin, which I also love. And after the Roman Empire fell in the West, Justinian got it in his head that he was going to bring it back to life. And this was 100 years after the fall of the Roman Empire. And we've seen this throughout history, people wanting to bring back what was lost, and it doesn't happen, right? So that's another perspective. The other one is that he's led a couple of incursions into Georgia and the Ukraine in the last sort of decade or so. And there's been no consequence because the rest of the world's been distracted by other things. So the first was Georgia in 2008. And because the US was focused, I think, at the time on Iraq and then Afghanistan, of course, they just weren't paying attention. And then Ukraine, it was a smaller incursion, achieved the same result. And the US was distracted by the Middle East as well as Yemen and the Horn of Africa. So Russia hasn't been a focus. So maybe he's just feeling brave. But when you look at all the articles, and there's lots that I recommend. The Dictator's Gambit, why what Putin is after on Ukraine, that's in the New York Daily News. The Big Bluff, the Jewish press, and obviously they're going to have a different perspective. Putin would be mad as Ukrainian invasion is an act of insanity from journalist Hitchens. And so basically the cost of this is so high. It will be a bloody conflict and it will isolate Moscow diplomatically and economically. Right. But then again, we watched him in Beijing, hanging out with Deng Xiaoping, if I'm saying his name right. And, so there's a lot of things, there's a lot of chess pieces playing, and he's the master chess player, right?
Well, one of the things that I thought of was about this thing about friends, right? The friends, and how the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I think China and Russia are pretty much they've been polarized in the same way, right? So right now there's a whole boycott of the Winter Games by by the Americans. And since he's being isolated by America as well, so Putin and Xi are both now on the same side, so to speak, of the social, the party. In terms of the party, they're the two guys not invited, right? So
Mm.
I was thinking about how we do in the end, no matter how distorted our view of the world is. I think we do desire this idea of being loved or liked by people. And when I was looking at all the stuff that was happening, and thinking to myself, now if you looked at it from through the lens of someone who had been in some way, scorned or hurt, and was, in some way trying to emotionally make themselves whole. It's the kind of behavior that happens to, the child that wasn't loved enough in terms of what they might act out in when they grow up, and get into society. So I was just wondering about that. Just wondering what really happened. Could it be as simple as Putin needs a hug? Someone go and get him.
All right. I'm going to take off from what Joe said and give an analogy that when we have a family get together, we generally find girls or kids, a particular age group, start mingling, and there's one who's left out. And the person who's left out inadvertently or because of the age difference, young or old, starts to throw tantrums just to get noticed, just to get back in. So putting that same analogy, because you said US, China, Russia, come on, the superpower right now opposing US is China. Russia is an also rare in this case, even though it, as a country, it still has significant power. So could it be, and I'm alluding to one of the articles, the links that you shared earlier, Andrea, could it be that this could be Russia posturing, or the head, Putin posturing that, hey, you've got to sit up and take notice. I'm a power to be dealt with properly. Could be another. One is the hug, and the other extreme is take notice, shake hands, keep me in your thoughts all the time. That could be another possibility. But as long as it remains in the realm of thought, it is fine. The minute there is an incursion and nothing happens, then it's just the confidence that I can win through, again, history. Death by 1,000 cuts. I can just cut a little bit, and then before you know it, I have it.
Although, fear is a big driver for him as well, right? And I think that when I was doing some research on Putin this week, I saw, I think it was Gordon Ramsay said he felt in this deep fear being in his presence. And it's very, very rarely you come across a person that makes you feel that way. Have you guys had that experience where you've met someone that really does bring out a deep fear in you, the way they carry themselves, something in their eyes, there's something, a bit unhinged, but sorry, go.
So intimidated with some for sure, and in awe, but rank fear, not yet, and I hope not.
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting experience, but I think it being in awe, or being around, I met Mother Teresa in Calcutta just not long before she died, right? And that was a moment where I can't explain how it felt to be in her presence. This tiny, and she was so wrinkled at that point in her life, right? And she just to be, she touched my head. I was just, there was something about her that I've never experienced it before. And we've all sort of run across a famous person or something in our lives, and they stop you in your tracks, right? And you can't get your words out, and you feel like an idiot because you don't want to be that person, but that's who they are, right? But so I think this is a story that I would really, really encourage everyone to go really wide on this one, because there's so many aspects to this story. Oil, gas pipelines, history, regaining power. Putin's, what is his driver? No one really knows. If you've got Russian friends, speak to them, ask their perspective. Business, the harm that it's doing to the Russian people. There's just so many aspects to it, and I'd love to get a clear vision of it, but from everything I read, I just can't get a clear vision. And those ex-CIA guys, right? I mean, they're probably some of the people that convinced us that there were weapons of mass destruction, which justified the Second Gulf War. So they're twisted in their view based on who they are and where they're from, right? So what's the truth?
Well, okay. Here's my stab at this. Okay, and by the way, Tim sends his apology. He's stuck somewhere. He's trying to join us by about 4 o'clock today. Uh, my I don't have a theory about the whole thing, but what I read Putin as is someone who has learned despotism. Right? He's not unnatural. He's learned it. He's a student of power, and he's not someone who's naturally charismatic. So to me, he behaves a little bit like the way you know when adult actors are asked to portray teenagers, the way you actually nail the performance is you actually over adult, right? By trying too hard to be an adult, you actually nail the teenager's performance. And what Putin tries to do, I think, is he's trying to emanate alpha all the time. He's always signaling alpha, but it seems to be off a script, right? So doing things like riding a horse.
Got one of them.
So I think I sense that he is almost he's almost a caricature of a villain, as in like he's trying to play the part of someone to be feared, and so he does what he has to do to maintain that. And so part of that, I think, is going to include things like invading a country, or threatening to invade a country. That's the kind of thing that's going to help the local constabulary think, oh, here, there's a guy who's got his balls where it should be. I mean, that kind of, you don't get that kind of it's like, just look at me, I'm the alpha, right?
Yeah. Wannabe alphas, they're a bit of a challenge in the world. I just want to acknowledge Wayne Chan's he's having a chat. He's always great. And Anand, my glasses. Anandi, is that right? Iya? I think that's one of your friends, Pravin, Anand. Yeah. Welcome. And also Hamayun Khan from Pakistan, member of IASSW USA. I don't know. But anyway, hello. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Yeah, so, maybe he just needs to get a really big car.
Yeah. Is Tim not joining because he knows I'm the alpha out here?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I spent a fair bit of time doing some research on what is an alpha male and what is a beta male. And an alpha male who substitutes who thinks they're an alpha male. So an alpha male doesn't try to be an alpha male. They're just a good fella. They take care of the men in the world. They take care of the boys in their communities. They're respectful towards women. There's no effort. It's just who they naturally are. And of course, that's my goal with my boys, raising them to be those sort of men, right? But I do think when we look around the world, there are a lot of examples of men in leadership positions who potentially think that they want to be alpha males and they're behaving in the way they believe, but it's actually, it's not good for society. And as we've talked about last week, we cannot afford more wars from an environment perspective. We just can't afford more wars. And I think we need to really transform our global political situation where they have to be younger, because if they're younger, they're going to focus on the issues that matter to the younger generation. But also we need to get 50-50 women with women's representation, right, so that all of the issues that need to be addressed are addressed. When it's older men have different priorities to younger people. They just do,
right?
And
right.
I mean, when I don't know. So India's like a really complicated sort of political beast, and you probably don't even want to talk about it because people they're either pro or against Modi, right? But is he? Yeah. What's he? How would you define him? Is he an alpha male wannabe, or?
I would definitely, when I look back as to how he was before he was the chief minister to who he is now, definitely he's turned a lot more alpha, and that continues to attract a whole lot of votes. Right. So, my personal opinion, there have been a lot of positives and a few negatives that have continued to come on, as with the previous government that we had, which was full of corruption. Mm-hmm. And here, it is a weak opposition that's the problem. The opposition can't get a hold of it together. They want to stick to that same dynasty, and people have weaned off that family. So bulk of us are very happy if we can bring together a considerable good opposition to keep those in power in check.
Yeah.
And that's not happening. And that's a big problem, that whatever rules they are trying, they've been consistently losing.
Yeah.
And therefore, the narrative is he's a bad guy. That narrative doesn't sell when there is data that we rely on. Right? Obviously, a few of the initiatives that he has taken have failed miserably. But as an entrepreneur, I would definitely laud that it takes guts to go ahead with such a move. Poor planning afterwards made sure it tanked. But Andrea, I'm here. I read the Western narrative that also affects my kids who are reading that. But that's written by somebody who's not living here, who's not seeing the plus and minus that is going through.
Yeah.
So net to answer your question, yes, he's definitely alpha. But more than him, it is the people around, and that's the culture that we live in, who want to suck it up and therefore try to put an ever a bigger persona, a bigger image that goes through. And suddenly, before somebody realizes, I'm not talking about him, we get stuck in our own image that has been created, that we are unable to break out. And therefore, just to live up to the image, we continue to do things certain way. Both I've all through my voting life, I've voted for all the parties based on the candidate and what they promise. So I've voted for the opposition. I voted for Modi as well, because we have multi-level elections. And I'm extremely happy being an entrepreneur, visibly seeing the cost of running a business, the corruption around it has come down because it's been digitized. I don't need to see a government official face to face. Everything is tracked digitally, everything goes through. And if there is a delay, then it can be escalated. This never happened in so many years. Equally, there were a few other aspects that failed. Demonetization failed. There was delay in implementation of the nationwide value-added tax scheme. But Andrea, if you ask me, net, I'm happy. I would be happier if there was a stronger opposition. Here, the opposition is crying wolf at every single action, which was funnily approved when they were in power. This guy is just implementing it. Suddenly, it can't become wrong. So people aren't fools. We can see, hey, look at it. This was approved by your government when you were a majority, and this guy is just implementing it. So you can't suddenly turn around. So people like me, I would think myself to be rational, that if there are genuine causes, put up your protest flag and we will join. But when it doesn't have to be Modi, it could be any person. And I'm just using human psychology, Andrea, that the three of us are talking. And if I continue to negate everything that a person does, at some point, the Stockholm syndrome will set in. You'll say, hey, person cannot be that bad. Doesn't he have anything good, anything positive about it? So the opposition is just crying wolf at everything. And at this point, I follow the print, like you follow a whole lot of news things. I follow Shekhar Gupta in the print, who's the only journalist who came and apologized that we read the wind wrong. We read the ashes wrong when Modi came back to power with a significant majority. He said we were stuck with the Western narrative. We thought it never went through. We did not go below. And I messed up as a reporter because they wanted to just stick to the narrative out there. And a simple example, the opposition kept telling now what Modi did last year, the last term, was asked all of us privileged lot to give up subsidized gas for cooking. Gas was subsidized for everybody, rich or poor. So he appealed to the rich that you've got money, can you give it up so we can give it to the poor? And this was completely poo-pooed by the opposition, the narrative, media. Nobody gave a damn. They said it's a failure. The same population voted him back in power, and then Shekhar was the only one. Shekhar Gupta, not me. He's a reputed journalist. He came and said that we did not look under. These are rural people, poor people, who are still cutting firewood and using them for everything. And for them, even if the gas can be used 3 days, 4 days in a month, the mother does not have to be coughing. The house does not have to be full of smoke. Very simple, simple privileges that we take for granted. And the opposition or the journalist or the Western narrative refused to consider it because it was against what they were looking at.
Wow.
Well, one of the companies I run is a market research entity. We deal in data, not just emotions. So if only the opposition was strong and had the sense to pick the right fight, and of course, pick a right leader, because I cannot vote yet again for that dynasty. My kids are never going to vote for a dynasty there. If only the opposition could be stronger, my country will be that much more healthier.
Yeah, it's so interesting, especially that example, like the subsidies for the poor. If the wealthy could take on board the cost, the 10% of the population, if they could take on board the cost, that's something that we're going to have to look at doing right across the board around the world if we're going to get through the climate crisis, making sure that the poorest don't suffer. And there's an article we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But what the Republicans are doing in the US, 100%. They're coming together and they're against anything that the Biden administration is doing.
Yeah,
and they're playing games that it's impacting people's lives, and so it's not for the interest of the people; it's for the interest of the party. In Australia, the Labor Party hasn't been strong for a long time, and they had so much infighting at the time. Boris Johnson winning the last election because the Labor, opposition was just so. The people just could not accept Jeremy Corbyn, and to me, it was Jeremy Corbyn, right? That was his name.
Yes.
For me, it was just like, surely anything's better than keeping the same party in power. But he was so wrong for the British people that they voted for Johnson. And of course, we've been seeing all the shenanigans he's been getting up to. And it's a consistent thing around the world, right? That the way politics is, everyone's playing a game, but they're not focused on actually the job of serving the people. And it's kind of crazy what's really going on around the world. And it's part of the failure of democracy. It's part of the lack of trust in the media and politicians. It's all, it's, because no one's got their eye on the job. they're just all playing games.
I think the thing about consequence, I think you mentioned it earlier, right? That's the real big thing. It's about what happens if you don't do the job, and that's the important thing. And if if you've had it's like for instance, I mean, you're at a party and you're having a pie, and you say, well, if you and you're enjoying the pie, you've had the pie, and then there's a chance to sort of win another hour at the party so you can have another pie, and you say, well, what's the consequence if I don't qualify for this second half? You just don't get to have the pie. It's not much of an incentive to say that if you don't do your job, you'll be voted out of office. That's not really an incentive. So what I thought is, what if politics was taken on this way? You make it high stakes and high reward. So you make it really financially worthwhile to become a politician, but you also add on the death penalty if you don't do it right.
Andrea, Joe's on a major tangent today.
Yeah, he wants to kill everyone.
So, I'm sorry. We're probably get banned on Facebook, right? Speaking about death to all. No, but I've always thought about this in terms of, the trouble with a lot of things is that when you don't do it, or you don't really put the effort in, it really doesn't cause that much of a problem. So for myself, I have that trouble motivating myself to do things. Like I've been trying to lose weight for years, and it's funny, you got to find the thing that finally motivates you. And for me, it turned out because I was so cheap that in order to save $75 on an insurance rider, I was prepared to lose weight so that I would make the weight on the for the contract. But everything else didn't work for me. What was the consequence of it? I didn't fear the consequence of not losing the weight, right? But I had a friend recently who was really, the consequence of him not losing weight was going to be he would probably die. And then he really changed what he was doing. So there were two things built into that. On one hand, his life became so much better. And on the flip side, it was he avoided death. right? So I'm just thinking about these kinds of extremes because it can get your attention. I mean, why not make it such that public service is something that you can qualify for, a great rewards to be had, but if you prove yourself to be wanting, you can really lose the ultimate prize. I mean, if you think about that, then it would take a special sort of someone to step forward and say, yeah, I think I can do a better job and I'm prepared to prove it. And if you go like, well, I presume you'd have some checks in place to see how exactly you evaluate that someone hasn't done the job or whatever it is, right? It wouldn't just be a case of the popular vote, right? Down with him, thumbs down. But if there was such a thing, I think it might create some different results.
All right, so we're going to kill politicians too. Good.
All of them.
And burn them for fuel. Yeah, burn them for fuel. Use them instead of firewood.
Oh, maybe we crucify them. Let's go old school. Should we move on to COVID?
Yes.
Sure, let's do something serious.
Yeah, no. But just remember, going back to the whole Ukraine story, I know it can be a bit overwhelming, but in my weekend reads, there's lots and lots of different perspectives, but that's not, even for me, it's not all of the perspectives that are worth paying attention to. Obviously, I can't read it all, but also I can't read anything in Russian language. So just read wide on it. And, some people are going to have their firm opinions no matter what. Sometimes I've seen people commenting on stuff I've been sharing, and they're very clear on what their opinion is, which I always find really interesting, because to me the story is so big and wide. I have no clarity of my opinion on my opinion of the story. So, but let's move on to COVID. So Denmark, they are now overflowing with virus cases, but have decided to embrace the bring it on attitude. Now, of course, the Scandinavian countries have always had a bit of a different. We saw Sweden sort of stay open, right? People are often looking at these countries as examples to follow, but the country that you're in, you always need to consider the health and age of the population. So, like compared to America, where obviously the vaccination rates are very low, but cases things like obesity, diabetes, all those sort of other things that exist more prevalently in society. But it's an interesting case. Going down into Asia again, Hong Kong is now in its first real state of crisis with COVID. And we were talking about the Cathay Pacific airline attendees that escaped quarantine and unleashed Omicron in the community. And basically Hong Kong's gotten to the point where they know that they can't live with the virus, but they can't stop it either. But they're under the Chinese sort of political leadership, and who have said to them, make controlling the epidemic as soon as possible an overwhelming priority. Now, the problem in Hong Kong is the majority of citizens of Hong Kong don't trust Beijing, as we've seen in the last few years. They expect at least 1,000 people will have died from COVID, which is 4 times the number since the beginning of the pandemic. And basically, Hong Kong and Kerry are saying, we just can't do what China does. We don't have the manpower, and we don't have the full authoritarian toolkit to actually, do anything about it. So it looks like Hong Kong's going to be, up.
Well, I mean, Hong Kong is in a very unenviable situation because they have this KPI that is hanging over their head, right? And also because what they've done is they've sold a basket of goods for which now they're having to pay. The population has been wound up about no COVID, so zero tolerance and whatever. And if you're in the slightest bit ill, then you have to kind of like show up to the hospital. And that policy is what's bitten them in the bum this time round. I mean, they're actually in a perfect situation to weather this without much of an issue. But the narrative doesn't fit the story that they've been telling their population before this. So, the daily cases are somewhere in the region of 2,000 plus, or a few days ago anyway, it was a 2,000 plus a day. Yet there were 10,000 people waiting to get into hospitals because they were infected, or at least they had that number as well, a backlog, right? When most of the people, if you're following the protocol. I mean, even the WHO has recommended to countries to just ease off on travel restrictions because it just doesn't work against Omicron, and the consequences are not as dire. They've actually recommended for most countries to just remove, like the more stringent travel restrictions. Hong Kong could come out and just say, listen, guys, the latest science is what it is. Everybody calm down. You're fine. Right. But they can't act that way. So now they're forced into the next thing where they're actually building this big hospitals, super hospitals to house patients that frankly don't need, from a medical point of view, they don't need hospitalization. They just need to be isolated at home. And it's just because they're trying to meet a KPI. They don't want people with COVID in the general population. And the only way you can do that is to take them into another place that is not Gen Pop. And if you can't find a place, you got to build a place. So that's what they're doing now, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we've seen the way China's handling the Olympians during the Winter Olympics, right? And there's no contact with anyone outside. There's no contact at all. It's a completely closed loop. And I've seen all sorts of weird and wonderful things going on there. But I don't know, like the Asian approach to COVID has been extreme all over the region when it can be, right? When it can be. I know in India, I mean, it must be with just the sheer population. It's impossible, right? When people are living on top of each other.
It is. And when it comes in waves, if you look outside, you'll ask what was COVID, because it's to a certain section. And I live by the beach, so I can see it as to what's happening. But here we also have this continuing tension running between the states and the center. And sometimes opposition happens just for the heck of it, not factoring in the people. But on the positive front, they have worked together, especially in the second and third wave, more so in the recent wave, with schools getting converted into hospitals and everybody volunteering and working together. It gives a good feel that, hey, the virus is here, we can't do anything, but we will get through it. And despite a regime change, wrong usage of word, a political party change in my state, the baton passing has been very nice. And the new party that's come back to power has visibly done a whole lot. Right. And in our case, of course, it's the only thing I need to be scared of is the WhatsApp university of fake news. Because a lot of people tend to believe what's happening there than the reality. But it's been 2 years now, Joe and Andrea, that I can see the apathy in the people outside. Whatever happens, I'm just going to go and go ahead with. Beyond a point, how much can you rein in? How much can you advise? And when they wear the mask, it's like here. It's like wearing a beard, saying, why even bother? It's you do it properly. So when I go to business meetings, we have started, and the other person does not put in and say, hey, you don't have to. I say, no, this is to protect you. So I don't want to infect you, and I don't want to get infected by other people. So I'm my mustache is my identity, and I've got to cover it up, and I'm happy about it.
Although it's so, I am looking forward to the end of mask wearing. It's so disgusting wearing a mask in the tropics. We just came back from Colac, and we went to visit this town called Takiwapa, which is a 62 BC shipping, not shipping, trading village. And in India used to trade through this village, right? And it was amazing just to how old it was and its history. And we were walking around this town in the middle of the heat of the day, and by the time we get out, your mask's soggy with sweat, and you're just like, oh God, I'm so looking forward to this being over, right? But there is but then we look at a country like Singapore, and so there's an article that Tim shared, and it's a shame he's not here because I know that he sort of dug into it because it's got some great data. But when Delta sort of variant peaked in Singapore, basically between August and December last year, basically the approach of the government and with vaccines, it averted 8,000 deaths, 33,000 severe cases, and 112,000 hospitalizations. And I don't know if you guys remember this. One of the things that used to frustrate the hell out of me when COVID first started was people quoting from the country that they were in. Well, if only 0.0001% of people are dying, then obviously we don't need to be taking this approach. But they were ignoring the data in the countries that weren't taking the approach, like America, where it was a hell of a lot more than 1% of people dying. So in this article, so in Hong Kong, 63.7% of people are fully vaccinated, and they've had 2.8 deaths for 100,000 people. So obviously that number's, so they're looked at one of the best in the world, right? So obviously that number's going to change. In Singapore, it's 15.7 deaths per 100,000 people. In America, it's 265.8 deaths per 100,000 people. Singapore's got 87.8% of the population vaccinated. America's still at 63.6%. But when you look at the news that's going on around the world and the different countries and how they're thinking about COVID, I do think that, even Australia's opening up to foreigners in March.
Right.
I do think we're coming to the end of the restrictions because people, like you say, people just, whether it's the right decision or not, people are sick of it.
Well, good pun there. The thing about this is that scientifically speaking, if the trajectory contains or remains where it is, that's definitely something that we're looking forward to. And the likely next step as viruses sort of evolve, likely next step is that the next variant of concern should be even less less dangerous than Omicron. That's the likely and most hoped for scenario.
Yeah.
The challenge, and again saying this, is people are going to just try and cover their computers and stop and mute the speakers now and say, don't jinx it for everyone. Where we could be in trouble if for some reason another variant comes along which just happens to be has the kind of combination of traits of being more contagious and more dangerous than Omicron, because it's always going to be the most contagious version that's going to overtake the infections. And right now, I think the number is something like 95% of infections are sort of attributed to Omicron right now. And because it's generally speaking much less harmful, it's being seen as something that we don't have to worry so much about. The thing that is of concern, and it's a growing concern, is actually long COVID. In terms of what actually it's causing and what potentially it has, because they're found now to see the symptoms that affect. I think it was in the article you shared last week was about the Alzheimer's like symptoms that were found in. It was a large cohort, but I think 10 patients, and they found consistently some data there to suggest that that COVID foggy brain that you get is related or similar to what happens with Alzheimer's. So I was on part of a webinar just a few days ago, and I asked the expert about what they thought might be the long-term effects in terms of health span. And a lot of people have no idea about that, right?
Yeah.
So as much as we now think in terms of, all right, we're taking our foot off the pedal for protecting ourselves from COVID, the problem is we may be ultimately widening the door for the consequences, long-term consequences for COVID, and not just for everybody now, but the youngest people, right? Yeah. So if you talk about the cohort that was most infected in Singapore in the recent times was not the oldest people. It was actually school children. School children now became the largest number of infected people. So I had the feeling when I went to the lift and then some kids came into the lift and I went, uh-oh, but that's the change, right? And they're the ones who are exposed as well. So what are the long-term effects? I mean, they may not have, they may be asymptomatic for now, but there's some things that are really affecting people long term. They're seeing things like, even for some people who've had a relatively mild COVID, they found breathlessness to extend in the long term. It's a big unknown. So yes, it seems it's like we're all going to get used to passive smoking. But I think there's something else that we're maybe not being careful about. I think Omicron is going to affect those people who it's obviously going to affect. Yep, we'll see that and we'll think, oh, the numbers are okay, it's relatively safe. But I think we're all playing around with the equivalent of a yet to be fully understood STD. Uh,
Yeah. No, I
we'll
think
get it by having fun with each other,
yeah, I think it's such an important point to make, and you know, we're lucky we can make the decision. I mean, Pravin, you've only
Right.
recently recovered from COVID, but you know, both of my boys are vaccinated, but you know, the neural development of children, that's one of the impacts. Heart for adults, so heart attack, strokes, lung damage, blood clots in the lung, that's another long form. And our lack of knowledge of that, and especially around Omicron, because we haven't got enough time to
Right.
understand it, right? The idea that just live with it, fine, I get it. You know, we need to get on. But there's, I think the deaths from COVID those numbers will be continuing once we've put it behind us, because it does have all of these physiological impacts in our bodies. That, you know, one of my friends in India, he's on permanent oxygen.
Ooh.
He's a young, healthy guy on permanent oxygen, you know. And I know a lot of, you know, in India and that devastating wave, a lot of it was just a sheer scale of people, and
It's not
they just
done
didn't
yet.
have the equipment, right? Yeah, I know.
It's not done yet. I just found out yesterday that my college junior, 3 years younger than me, died because of COVID-related heart attack. So
Right.
it's not, however mild you say it is, Delta, Omicron, everything is in the population.
Yeah.
So we've just got to continue to remain cautious.
Yeah, but we're privileged if we can. Right?
Yes, but I'm taking a slightly more philosophical stand right here, Andrea and Joe, that I'm full of gratitude. Thank you for this day, and tomorrow's another day, and I intend to live it fully.
Yeah.
With or without COVID, that's just personal, and there's nothing selfish here. There are two ways to look at it: negative and positive. Of course, the whole world is full of negativity, but could we just take a step forward, saying, "I will enjoy today. I'm right now here in the no show, and I'm enjoying every moment of it." And I
Yeah.
hope to pass that on when I get out of the no show as well.
Yeah.
Because, like Joe said, COVID is here to stay. Passive smoking, or like hypertension and high blood pressure, or diabetes, it's here to stay. How can it just vanish? It's going to continue to lurk around. As long as we are cautious and also strong mentally, we can push through.
Yeah.
Well, my view on Omicron is that we should at least do okay. And again, it's the approach that I had before COVID, right? I was the person who wouldn't want to shake hands because I didn't want to make anyone sick. I tried to prevent people from getting sick, from having what I had as well. And I used to take the approach with just the flu. I didn't like people to get the flu, catch the flu, pass on the flu. I just felt that way. And I think what would be a pity is what we could do, as in, like, I think what we should try to do is make sure that we don't have unavoidable consequences, right? So if they're avoidable, as in, like, if we could just maintain hygiene, if we could maintain a few good practices, so we don't take everything for granted, I think we'd be better off. You know, I agree that the world can't go on the way it's been going on for the last few years. It's going to be too much of a tax on our mental state. But at the same time, I think there's some things that we can still take away from it, right? I think I've been casually observing, because I judge everyone around me. When I'm in the bathroom, I'll notice that people don't wash their hands for the same 20 seconds that they learn to do. I mean, it's just going away, right? So we're becoming careless again, and it would be a pity if, you know, I mean, someone dying from the flu should be just as bad in terms of news, right? And that happens, and that used to happen. And just that for now, if we think, okay, Omicron's the more harmless version, is about as bad as flu, we should still, I think, try to get rid of it. You know, one of the great things about the last 2 years is that they've had no flu. You know, it's actually it's actually
Yeah.
been not eradicated, but it hasn't caused much of a problem, and a lot of that's because we've been so careful about COVID.
Mm. Although in Europe, the flu took off because they sort of let everything open just as Omicron sort of landed. But
Yeah,
I can
and
promise you both one thing. Next time I see you, I'm going to give you both a big hug. All right? And Joe, you better accept it.
There's good science. There's good science to it. The hug is actually a hug to the side like this, right? Is literally safer than a handshake.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought Pravin's comment about, that real mindfulness, being in the moment during this time, like when you sit in fear, and fear is, the future, it's a future-based feeling, right? We've all watched our friends in our community on social media express, their fears and their worries and their concerns and, their despair and all that sort of stuff. And there's a whole bunch of people I've been reaching out to, I'll just ring them up and go, right, I've just been noticing what you're posting on Facebook. Are you all right? Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And I'll do it whenever I can, just to help people, because not that I'm capable of being in a good place all the time, but most of the time I've been able to manage my mindset. But a lot of people are really struggling with it. And I think if you're a person that can do it, help other people, just reaching out and just give them a ring and checking in on people, because, it is managing your mindset and being in the moment, I think has definitely been a saving grace for me at this time as well. And things like this, doing the No Show, having a chance to talk to smart people that I love. All right. Do you want to move on to environment and society, or any final thoughts on COVID?
No, please carry on. I don't know whether this is a related story, but there was a fun little story about massage place in Singapore, which they broke a few of the rules. I actually just realized it's not so much to do with COVID. They just broke the rules of the massage establishments in Singapore. I tell you what, let me do this. Why don't you go ahead? I'll go. This has been my trailer for something fun and salacious coming up in a while. I'll get you something. Yeah.
All right. Let's kick into environment and society. So last week I decided to really bring these two together because I think the topics are absolutely interlinked, and we can't change the way business is done unless we also change the way society is run. So the first one is a title called "This Could Be a Transformative Moment, Coca-Cola to Increase Use of Reusable Bottles." So Coca-Cola is consistently the largest plastic waste producer in the world, in the consumer goods space. And they have announced plans to increase the share of beverages that come in returnable or refillable containers. I've never seen one of these, by the way. From 16% currently to 25% by 2030. And I got to tell you, I was pretty underwhelmed by the numbers. I mean, to me, the where we are in the world with the amount of waste that's in the world, that's all they're willing to do by 2030. And we've got to remember plastic use is going to triple by 2050. So, but a recent analysis by Oceana found that if the increase in refillable water bottles, if it's increased by 10%, it reduces marine plastic pollution by 22%. And then the other commitment is that they've set a target to collect 100% of its packaging by collecting bottles or cans, regardless of brand, for every one produced by 2025. Now, that looked like a good piece of news, right? They've set up collaborative partnerships with governments and industry partners in Belgium, in this article, Belgium, France, Germany, UK, Norway, Spain, and Sweden. Now, this is the bit that made me go, So these are the countries that ship their waste to the east and to developing countries like in Africa. So if they're really going to be serious, they can do all the nice fancy work in Europe and look good and get lots of positive publicity out of it. But the problem is not there; it's out here. And I'm thinking of a 22% reduction in plastic pollution based on the amount of filth that gets washed up on the beaches here. It's nothing. 22% is nothing. It's because it's so big. But it's the first major brand to put in place something like this. So we've got to celebrate it, but it has to be a bigger effort. It just has to be. It's
Mhm.
not. I think all of the waste producers have to come together and form a collective and address the global waste problem. They have to fix it and they have to clean it up. They've taken no responsibility. We saw an example, I think it was Papua New Guinea, where glass bottles were removed within weeks. The island was just full of plastic waste within weeks. And on the islands, you can't get it off. Like it's really difficult to take waste from the
Right.
island and dispose of it, right? So it's just, yeah, it's not good enough for me. And I think we've got to put a lot more pressure on these sort of companies. Should you have a look at that one?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Andrea, you know that I'm an avid trekker, and the bulk
Yeah.
of my trekking is done with a group called India Hikes, one of the largest trekking companies, which promotes DIY trekking. But what they do, as soon as we go in for the orientation, give us a small bag. It's a green color bag, and we've got to carry it all through with us. And every time we see waste, we've got to fill it up.
Yeah.
Wrappers, bottles, etc. And they want to inculcate healthy trekking and to keep the mountains clean, because how does it come back? It comes back with the rains, clogs everything that it gets into. But from what you say, if Coca-Cola can do it from the source, every small step we'll have to celebrate with them. So it encourages. The news article also says that most of these large companies make larger announcements but do not follow up.
Yeah.
But as long as they keep doing it in small bits, it's absolutely great. But if we can cut it off at the source, and with your permission, I'm going to delve a little bit into my childhood.
Mhm.
Anytime we had guests in the family, and I came from a middle class family, there were only so many plates available. So suddenly, when you have guests, I was sent to the roadside corner shop to buy plates made out of leaves. Leaves were stitched together using a fiber. And I went and bought that, and we ate in that. And after that, we put it outside in a bin, and the cows ate it. So it was a complete circular path from the tree to us and then back. And there was obviously not a single bit of plastic that was there. And when we traveled, it used to be in stainless steel containers that we used to take. So obviously, we used to bring it back or send it back through. And this happened in my generation, and I'm equally culpable for getting into plastic. So it's weaning myself off is going to, but some of us here are trying to see if we can get back to that model where we take from nature, give back into nature, and do not misuse Mother Nature. And
Yeah.
with so much nonsense coming through, a little bit of recycling would work. And I wanted to showcase a brand new book from a recent Indian author. He and I cycled well together, Srinivasan and Subhashri, who've come up with 2 books, in fact, 6 months ago. How Can You Live Perfectly Zero Waste, No Nonsense Guide to Living Sustainably in India? Absolutely looking back to what our grandparents used to do, which was completely sustainable and local.
Yeah.
So is it possible for us to go back? The partner book for this is 100 ways you can adapt sustainable living. So when you start talking about Coca-Cola and such larger companies, well, Srini and a bunch of them take their cups to Starbucks. Say you put it in whatever coffee you want to do, you put it in here. So I will enjoy, but I will enjoy responsibly with reusable cups. And every little bit helps, because it's so messy up there in the Himalayas. It's full of junk generated by us humans.
Yeah.
And then we turn around and complain when the sewers get clogged and it gets filled up. You can't blame the government for that. You just can't throw it. You can't use. Thankfully, a lot of state governments have started banning single-use plastics and also implementing that ban. A hill town of Ooty or a Kodaikanal, you will not find a plastic cover anywhere. It's just paper covers, or you bring your own bag and take it off, and we'll be charging. We need more of that. So the Coca-Cola news is good news. I'm one of those to cheer and to see and celebrate every small step in this direction. We are still eons away, but hopefully it's in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm all about celebrating every small step, but a company like that, why are they still using plastic bottles? Apparently, the CMO said because our customers want them. I'm like, well, there should be no more plastic bottles. That bottle, 10% of those bottles are recycled, 10%.
Yes.
And that can last in the environment from 500 to 1,000 years. It's just, and it's, you've used that item within minutes. But then, I don't know if you ever saw my video where I went to visit Delhi's Garbage Mountain. Did you see that?
No.
I was on a business trip and I decided to go and have a look. But while I was there, I did some research. So the individual Indians' waste contribution is a tiny percentage of an American, like tiny percentage. And I think culturally in India, people are still connected to those older ways, definitely more than like Australians or Singaporeans. I think we need 3 Earths to maintain their lifestyle the way they live. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's just, we don't need plastic bottles. Let's just get rid of them. Use cans, use bottles, or even the cartons. Because they're all producing the water bottles in plastic bottles too, right? So we just need to get rid of them. Because I screwed my back up picking up rubbish off the beach. I'm really not happy about it. But anyway, okay, another one. Big banks fund new oil and gas despite net zero pledges. So we saw some stories recently of the British government approving new oil production sites. But these are the big banks that are part of the green banking group, right? So it includes HSBC, Barclays, Deutsche Bank. So apparently HSBC put an estimated 8.7 billion into new oil and gas in 2021, Barclays 4.5 billion and Deutsche 5.7 billion. And the money is going towards companies like ExxonMobil, Shell, BP and Saudi Aramco. Now, but the good news is it's a big drop from 2020 when HSBC, put more than 18 billion into oil and gas. So it's going in the right direction, but what they're saying and what they're doing are not necessarily the same thing.
So the philandering husband is visiting the mistress, but less often.
We do, but we do need an intelligent exit from, oil and gas isn't going to go anytime soon. I don't know if you've been seeing some of the articles. The satellites can track methane. Have you been seeing some of those articles that have been circulating? So apparently in Russia, a lot of the gas pipelines have just got these amazing amounts of methane coming out of these pipes, and that can something that can be fixed quickly. And methane is obviously more damaging in the short term than the other emissions. But yeah, we've got a lot of work to do. But a good news story. It's a Guardian piece. Thanks to everyone at ASDA. Success for anti-poverty campaigner Jack Monroe.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I just thought this is a really, really important article, and I want to encourage people to read it. So basically, in ASDA, which is a supermarket chain in the UK, I think it's in other countries too. It has a food product which it calls value ranges, and so this is for people who are living in poverty or just want to have the cheapest product. And it disappeared from the shelves. And this lady, Jack Monroe, basically brought attention to this. So we've obviously experienced inflation worldwide. And this goes back to your story about the gas in India, right? So a bag of pasta was 29p, and then it increased to 70p due to inflation. And it sort of talks about the story of,
right.
A single mother with a couple of kids goes in to do her weekly shopping, and she's only got £10 to spend. That's it. And that £10 before inflation was already impossible. Post, an inflation world, it's a catastrophic situation for people living at the bottom of the poverty cycle, right? And I think it's just such an important thing that the people who are making the rules, they don't live that life. They don't understand that pain. They probably never understood that pain. But whatever we do, there has to be, we have to commit to keeping food available for the poorest people in our community, because, walking around with your baby and your kid in the trolleys and everyone's crying because you can't afford to buy enough food to get through a week, people with more money should, put the inflation in the higher price goods, right? But not in the value ranges. So I just thought that was a really powerful piece. And, we can all help more for the people who have the least in our societies. And we have to.
It just it reminded me of the conversation I had just a while ago. One of my clients talking about this movement that she was it is a global movement. I think you may have heard about it, the Buy Nothing movement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's such a great idea, right? Just that in communities, wherever you are, form a community and try and help each other, so no one has to buy anything. I mean, that's the general idea. And it was kind of it was actually interesting to hear about the problems that come about with that. As in, like, you in a poorer neighborhood or near a poorer part of town, it makes complete sense where someone could have very basic needs and want to pass it around. But it's more than just about helping the poor. It's also about being environmental and reusing things and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought it was just wonderful how you could actually, if you were open enough to ask, and if you were in this organization, actually ask for the things you need, and somebody else who has the excess capacity could actually help in that respect. But my friend was she does try to help wherever she goes. She was lamenting because she actually lives in a good part of town in New York. And because of the rules of the Buy Nothing movement, it's all supposed to be regional. She has a very different sort of Buy Nothing movement happening around her place, where the things that they're kind of asking for or giving each other are things like an exercise bicycle because you don't need one anymore, that sort of thing.
Right.
But great for the environment, I thought. In terms of, like, you could find a use for things that you may not have had a use for before. Someone else might want to pick up your stuff.
Yeah, I love the idea of it, but I think in some ways, like, there's a lot of local businesses. If you're not going to buy anything for a year, it's going to have a big impact, and they've already had a hard time, right? So for me, it's not about not buying something for a year. It's about buying more consciously. So not buying excessively. So my husband can't cope with Lazada, right? Because it's just too hard. And when you're in a country where it's a second language in the mix, so the drivers typically don't speak English, it's just, we've had things just not turn up, right? So it's really frustrating. He gets frustrated. So he goes, he's like, I need it to be easy. I'll go to Amazon. But, you buy one thing off Amazon and it's got to fly all around the world. That's a big amount of emissions, right? So for me, it's all about, so people, we talk about the distance between farm to table needs to be shrunk. But for every single thing that we buy, the distance between where it's manufactured and when we get it needs to be shrunk. So, Lazada, while it might be shipped out from China, it's shipped out in bulk, which means every individual item has less impact. So its last journey to us is smaller than flying it in from the US, right? So we've just got to shrink the way we live, and obviously buy less. Don't buy unnecessary things. Don't buy single-use things. Don't buy crap. Don't buy something that's going to fall apart within a week. Like, everything that you buy needs to be of quality that's going to last. But the other thing is shrink its impact, shrink the amount of emissions that could have been produced by just getting it to you, and so the whole e-commerce boom that's been happening, and, did another article talking about Amazon now has basically bought up all of this storage around the world for their operations, right? But when we're being lazy and going for the easier path, we're also contributing to the environment by not working harder for what we want. So Tim's here. I think we should make him sit there for a while. He told us he left a comment saying he was in the moment. That's why he was late. What do you think? Should we let him in? Anyway,
he's got a ticket. He's got a ticket.
Yeah. But I thought that was a really good story, and a positive story that a company's taking care of its, the low income people in its community. So, hello, Tim.
Hey,
Tim,
hi,
Tim, Tim with,
movers and shakers.
Tim with the trimmed beard.
Yeah, well, I will never be able to compete with you, but I thought I'd try with the shirt at least.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Sorry I'm late, everybody, but I've been listening to the show. So
Cool.
I've been following along with the stuff you say. And I disagree with that middle bit, but the earlier bit I agree with. And the bit just now, yeah, fair enough. But the other bit, not so much.
Yeah, so in the headlines, ladies and gentlemen, Tim agrees with killing politicians.
Yeah.
Not that bit.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so a couple of other articles worth looking. Oxford invited an AI to debate its own ethics. What it said was startling. Please read that. Unless any of you guys did read it and want to talk about it.
What did it say? Give us the
No. We haven't got time. And potentially toxic levels of pharmaceutical drugs found in rivers across the world.
Yeah.
This was a really interesting one because it's the first time it's gone completely worldwide, and I think the ramifications from that one, like a lot of the issues, people not being able to get pregnant, the rising in special needs. Is it this, or is it the industrialization of food? There's a lot to it, and also
It's 5G. We all know it's 5G. Come on.
Oh, right, yeah. Another one is there's a brand of chocolate which I've only just recently bought called Tony's Chocolonely. Do you know that brand? It's very sort of bright and anyway.
Yes, it's a Dutch brand.
Yeah. They were knocked off the slave-free chocolate list about a year ago because they partnered with this company called Barry Callebaut, and but basically they admitted that there's 1,700 incidents of child labour in its supply chain, and a lot of it's linked to this company, and obviously just doing business in Africa. But they're facing up to it, they're owning up to it, and they want to make sure that they get it out of their supply chain. But this bigger company, Barry Callebaut, has identified 21,258 cases of child labour in its supply chain. So while you kind of read that and think, well, I'm not going to buy that chocolate anymore, I think the fact that they're owning up to it and that they're committed to addressing it, that's big part of the challenge that we're facing is companies aren't even owning up to the basic stuff, right? So I applaud that.
Nothing to object to that. I wouldn't want to step on that. I was thinking about how when companies
Headline:
are trying to
Joe doesn't object to child labor.
when people are trying to do the right thing, right? And again, we sometimes don't we sometimes don't celebrate them for the things that they've done before. It's always a challenge, right? I keep thinking about the husband who decides that I've got to do better, so he paints the house, he fixes all the pipes, and he does everything he can to fix everything. And the wife goes, but you still left the tube of toothpaste open, right? I mean, that is the kind of thing that we tend to have with companies as well. They've done all this bad before, and they tried to do something to fix it up. And I think we look back and go like, oh, they haven't quite fixed it up enough for us to get over it. That show before, I think it's As Good as It Gets. Remember that movie? And I always have that as a little bit of a thought. Are we sometimes so hurt we can't get over things to get to a point where we say this is, and again, we don't have to accept that it's going to be as good as it gets, but today this is where it is as good as it gets. I was talking about the optimism that we sometimes rob ourselves of, and we keep thinking that things are just terrible today. There is a lot of reason to be optimistic, right? I was talking about, like, for instance, in Canada, how that number was the per capita number of gun ownership in Canada was higher than the US, and that surprised me. And I just thought about how, like, for poverty and things like that, the numbers have come to a point where they're better than before. And as you rightly pointed out, Andrea, as well, that recently there's been a regression because of COVID. But to look overall, and to go like, it's, we've come along quite well. I mean, someone who's born, I would say born today, but in this room, all of us are pretty likely to get to 75 years old. I mean, that's something that we couldn't have said maybe 30 years ago, which is not the way we looked at things. So there's some things that are great. They're not as fantastic as they could be, but for now, it's kind of good. So, I think a little bit of as good as it gets sometimes for companies trying to turn their big ships around. Maybe ships are the wrong analogy. Is something to celebrate as well.
I think it all depends on the motive, though. It depends on the heart of their reasoning. Is somebody admitting to something because they're about to be found out anyway, so they went out with the admission to try and get a better deal from public sympathy? Is it something that they're doing as just a PR exercise, a smoke screen? Like Pravin was saying earlier, some companies are just are making big declarations and then doing nothing about it because some other CEO in the future will do it. So what is the motive? So if Tony's Chocolate Only have gone, we've come in, we've taken over this thing, and it's been brought to our attention. We did an investigation. We're shocked and dismayed by this, and this is something that we've taken steps to not only fix, but we've also gone in to help those communities where they feel that this is the other part, that those communities feel that they need their kids to go and work. And if their kids aren't working in these places, are they subject to other dangers? Surely it would be great if they could be in education and everything else, but so we may be also imposing our own values on communities that
I would agree, because a lot of the Western folks came down here and said child labor when the kids, it's always is something that they work in the parents' farms. It's a family farm, so they finish school and they come and help out on the farm. But when you use just one single metric, less than 18 working somewhere, child labor ban, you can't do something blanket, because that's their apprenticeship. That's something that they learn hands-on, and it's a job to help out with the family. It's like my daughter going into the kitchen to help. That doesn't constitute child labor. But if you use a single metric for everything, I'm not saying what's going on with Tony's is right or wrong. I'm just talking about the narrative and using one single standard yardstick to measure everything around the world. It doesn't work in my part of the world.
I think of like the mining in Africa for the precious metals, or diamond mining, or that sort of thing, where the children are genuinely suffering, physical slavery, right? I don't think Tony, whatever it is, Chocolonely, I don't think that they. I think that they are an ethical company, but they're working in an unethical industry, and they're doing what they can. But to me, this is the whole Scope 3 part of the climate crisis, right? So it's businesses now need to have full view and full control of their supply chain, and they're so far away from that. Like I always remember when my first job, I was in charge of communications for an aerospace company, and we used to build some of the wings and bits of planes for Boeing, and they were constantly in the factory checking out these things, right? Because a tiny crack in a wing could bring a plane down. So they were all over their supply chain, and it was a very impressive experience for me as a young professional to see this. And then you go around the world and work in different industries and see what's going on, and the distance between the business and the people who are producing the goods in the supply chain has just become, so wide. People are dying. People are being sold into slavery. The crochet top that we were talking about from Target last week, but we're at the point now where we know we need to change the way we do business, and that's going to be a big part of it. So it's a whole new profession. Supply chain integrity will be a whole new profession. That's going to be a big part of it. And we saw that with pork from China. It tracked through a blockchain because a whole bunch of people died from eating contaminated pork from China. So the next thing was implementing it with blockchain, and they were able to track it from the pig to the table. Yeah. So supply chain's a fascinating area.
Oh, my part of the world, the change is slow, but it's positive. That even the star restaurants here have a mandate to source things locally,
Yeah.
not to get them shipped from wherever in Europe over to India to get through, but to say so with pride that it is locally sourced,
Yeah.
that it is done here. That's a slow movement, but it's a lovely movement starting through.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a faster movement now. We need to reduce the transport of anything that goes in or on our body, right?
Joe is right there. Kill these slow guys.
Yeah.
There's a growing list. The hit list. Hang on, let me just get onto my dark web and start looking for a hitman.
Just a couple of things to pay attention to. So the
Yes.
zoos are looking at, say, basically they're freezing genetic samples from endangered species to, you know, obviously when they face extinction. And we're seeing in Portugal and Spain a terrible winter drought, which is going to devastate crops. And of course, yesterday we also saw the landslide in Brazil, which they're also attributing to climate change. But the big one that I just really wanted to mention was, we've mentioned this a few times. So for a very short period of the year, the scientists can go to Antarctica and study what's going on there. So now they're in the second year of a 5-year program where they're studying the Thwaites Glacier. And this is also called the Doomsday Glacier. This is one of those stories that I'm keeping an eye on, because they're probably going to have to head back soon. So the data is sort of coming to the end for this year. But Antarctica holds 90% of all of the fresh water on Earth. And Thwaites is one of the largest glaciers in the world, and it's melting. It's melting from the bottom, from warmer water. It's melting from the top, from sunlight, and it's fracturing apart as it moves, and big pieces are carving off. So basically 3 things are destroying it. They're extremely concerned about this glacier because it's a plug as well. And basically once it comes off, it's the size of Florida. Once it comes off, so just that movement will increase global sea levels by 2 inches, but I've also seen 2 feet in other articles. So 2 inches and 2 feet is a significant difference. So, but behind it is another, basically enough more glacial melt that it is the size of Alaska. And this is when we're getting up to the 25, 30, 100 feet sea rise. So we still don't know what's going on there, but they're scared that we've already hit the tipping point. Thwaites is cracking where it connects to the land. And but basically we're looking at an unstoppable process once this kicks off. But, you know, like the Himalayas as well, a few years ago, the scientists were saying it's already past the tipping point. And I know that living in Chennai, you guys have experienced some terrible droughts.
Right.
Is the conversation happening in India about the risk of when the Himalayas melts or the glaciers melt? Because it's agriculture.
Not enough.
Yeah, right.
Not
it's
enough.
It's agriculture. It's drinking water. It's, you know, animals. I mean,
a lot of life is built on the runoffs from the Himalayas.
Yeah.
Ganges, Yamuna, everything comes through from that, but not enough talk is going on.
Yeah.
And not to mention, from a global perspective, the beach is 700 meters that away. Anything happens, next no show, I'll be swimming and keeping my head above water and talking to you.
Yeah.
Not enough talk is going on, or it's something that looks so disastrous, I don't even want to get that into my conversation. So it's, you know, that's the thought process that's running through.
Right.
I think it's all about it's all about the proximity to the problem, right? I was thinking about this. You're talking about tomorrow's problem, and today's problem is something else. Wait a
minute. So Thwaites is expected to come off within the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that there isn't a problem. Like for me, having too many plates of char siu rice in a row is going to lead to me putting on 20 pounds in the next 2 months, right? But it's tomorrow's. It's tomorrow's problem. And what I'm saying is it's eclipsed by today's problem, which is I'm trying to get a job. I'm trying to get the next meal and all those different things, right? So I remember thinking about, like when it comes to politics, for instance, we talk about things, big ideas, and politics. A lot of elections are won on the basic things. It's about money in my pocket, food for my family, shelter for ourselves. And a lot of these things, these are bigger ideas, and they're completely valid, but they're also the thing that I'm not thinking about today. So, do I care about the earth? Yes. Am I going to burn this wood to cook the food I need tonight? Yes, because that's the more pressing thing. If I don't have you know what I mean? So those, we have to figure interventions that make it possible for people to take the right actions in their own self-interest, and that really, I think, is the challenge. It's if you don't solve some of the basic problems, people can't look at the bigger, more the bigger, less pressing, immediately pressing ideas. Like what was there was an idea about why
Importance of urgency.
why old people don't care so much sometimes about long-term problems, because they're not going to be around for it, right? So it's actually going to be, it's something a bit like that, as in, like, because it's not the pressing and immediate problem that they see, they don't have as much capacity for it.
The person who needs to burn wood to feed their family is not the person who's part of the bigger problem in the world that's created the problem that we need to solve, right? So,
Right.
and there's all sorts of stuff coming out now about percentage of emissions. So the top 10% in the world, and we're all part of that, we need to change how we live, because we're the ones that are responsible for the emissions. So,
yes,
this idea of going into the future, it's not a priority now because I've just got to focus on this now. And it's like, how can it not be a priority? We're all parents. This is, and this is going to impact us. And it's a real struggle for me, because I am gently and delicately sharing some pretty scary information on a regular basis, trying to gently wake people up to the fact that we have no more time to lose. So every single thing that we do, every change that we can create ourselves and wider change, is going to make, so we can't stop what's happening, but what we can do is make it less crap for our children.
right.
And if that's not a priority, I honestly, I don't know how to communicate it in any other way. It's a real struggle for me.
It is a priority. It is a priority, but I'm going to relate to the necessity of awareness in a language that the recipient can understand. And I'm going to give you a personal example. 2004, the tsunami struck here. It struck the worldwide, but it also struck, and we had never seen a tsunami or heard about it before, except that it happens in Japan. So what did I do? The news spread, and this was before WhatsApp, that the sea has gone in. So I went to the beach to see the sea that had gone in. Thankfully, I lucked out in this place. It didn't come back, but in the beach a few kilometers away, it rushed back in and swept people. So I didn't know what a tsunami was. The news was the sea had gone in, because that's how it works. It sucks the water and then brings it right back. We didn't know. And I was up there when my mom or my father-in-law, somebody called and said, "Get your ass back home." And I come back home, and 15 minutes later, the sea comes back. And so it's purely a question of what I do not know. I don't know. So I'm going to go ahead and do foolish stuff again. So coming down from that 10%, Andrea, how can that information be translated into a language that the normal people can understand, so they realize, at least the slightly bigger percentage of sane ones who are ready to invest for the immediate future, if not today and tomorrow, but at least if I do it, can I defer whatever is going to happen by 1 year, 2 years? Can I, and we need the marketing of vegans. And I'm going to tell you, because a few of my friends are vegans, it is not enough if you are a vegan. You got to tell the whole world you're a vegan, and you have to shame the other people who are non-vegans. Right? That's my definition of a vegan. And we've got to use the similar concept here, that do you love the environment? Are you ready to do it? Can we build a cult around it? Can we if necessary, shame the people into doing the right things. And we would need
I
to
think we need a
run that.
sitcom.
Ah!
Sitcom that's situated around climate change, so we use humor to deliver hard-hitting messages that
Yeah.
people go, this is going to be part of my vernacular and part of my lifestyle. I mean,
Yes.
if you look at the sitcoms over the 70s, 80s, 90s, even presumably before that, but I was only watching those ones, they've addressed a lot of multiracial issues. They've addressed a lot of tolerance issues. They've addressed a lot of these sorts of issues where they make it just part of normal life is to talk about these things and to do these things differently. And so I say it with my tongue in my cheek, but at the same time, that's kind of cool. It's true we don't have the time to sort of come up with a hit show necessarily, but why not? I mean,
well, I know one thing. It will be in Korean.
No, well, there'll be a zombie apocalypse climate problem.
So the UK has got a couple of its sitcoms or whatever those crappy shows are, where they actually have brought more and more of the environment message. But like just any Hollywood movie, any US sitcoms. Just finished watching Schitt's Creek, right? And every single time I see someone turn up with a takeaway container, it's in a plastic cup with a straw. And
that's me for some reason.
Yeah, and the media, that industry has not adopted any message about not using this stuff. There's no awareness in the TV. So Hollywood, I think, has got a lot to do, and they're not doing anything yet, which is really
a massive media
amazing
outlet, and it's really important.
Yeah, and they're not, and so there's multiple layers of it, but all of us need to be speaking up. So the whole vegan thing it's a funny one, right? But vegans are the most annoying people on earth. But we all need to become more vegan, right? We do. We need to shrink our input. And in India, it must be just even being vegetarians better. In India, that's easier to do than most. Our diets. It's just trying to convince my boys. But if I buy them red steak, I won't get air flown from Australia. I'll get Thai red steak. So shorter transport, right? So but it is a frustrating thing when you've been in this. I've gone through the fear, I've gone into the despair about what's coming for our world, and I've come out the other side and said what I can do is make sense of this information for people, because sometimes it's too complicated, and share that. But people aren't. They just, and I talk to people and they say I'm almost ready. I'm almost ready to face it. And I'm like, oh, come on, let's move. But almost ready is good, I suppose. But everything we do now matters, and then the faster we do it, we need to be built. We need to be building refugee cities around the world for those parts of the world that are going to have, where people are just going to have to leave because there's no water, or it's too hot to live, or all the the forest is going to die because it's going to be too hot, or the fishermen have got no fish left. We should be preparing for this, and we're not seeing it because it's coming. How bad it is what we can control now.
Well, the human race hasn't had a very good track record, because around 2017, I think they were preparing for a possible pandemic. It's one of those things
and then they fired everyone.
We knew it was coming, and we go like, not effective, so we'll fire everybody and reduce the budget and stuff like that. So our track record, unfortunately, not good. And I think wasn't your article that you shared as well?
Really?
We're worse than that. I think $1.6 trillion is being used to subsidize things that will kill us.
Yeah, that's right. That was a later share before I put the links together. But I think it's $1.8 trillion is going into all of these industries, and those subsidies, if we could put them into the industries that could potentially help us, we might actually. And that's a sort of large scale impact that's going to make a difference, right? Real difference, and it's still not happening. And it's.
I mean, for me, there's just. We've said this time and time again, but it's three major places. One is government taking action, and they need to fear losing an election to do it. Two, it's big business taking action, and they need to fear losing customers to do it. And three, it's us taking action because we're the ones who vote and buy stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's the three of them. And I mean, the Coca-Cola thing you were talking about before, yeah, it's a step in the right direction. It's not big enough, and honestly, it's not taking into account. It is, in one sense, it's taking into account the fact that those European countries where they're planning to do it are more likely to recycle the recyclable bottle than some other country where, whether it's recyclable or not, I'm just going to throw it in the river. See,
Yeah.
so that kind of makes some sense as well. But that means we've got an education thing. And when I think back to my childhood, I remember, this is going to sound pompous and twattish, but I remember sitting on my dad's boat drinking Coke out of a bottle and flinging the bottle overboard and listening to it splash and being very excited as it blobbed down into the thing. And we didn't think twice about flinging it overboard because it was out of mind, out of sight.
Yeah.
So it's an education thing. It's a cultural awareness thing, which is what the point of this is, and what Andrea is doing is about awareness. And then it's about helping people make a change, a shift of some perspective in the way that they do things. So I still throw things away. I just don't do it from a boat anymore.
I don't know. I remember seeing a small child when I was a teenager throw a plastic bottle in the ocean, and I was like, no. And I just remember this sick feeling came over me, and it's never gone away. Like I see the waste out there, and individual waste. I took a photo of a table where a stall owner had left all of their rubbish from one day, and it was multiple cups, plates, forks, cutlery, and I took a photo just to show that individual impact in a day, and times that by billions of people, and we don't see, and we don't think, and that's. I struggle with that. Like, how can you not see it? Because the sickness in my gut is there every time I see it, and I'm like, how can you? And I don't want to shame anyone, because shame doesn't achieve anything. You've got to be, like my son had a plastic bottle of Coke the other day, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Because they know we don't take plastic bottles, but he was in an uncomfortable, dehydrated situation, and he had to have it. But it's so rare. We say no plastic everywhere we go. No plastic, no straws. Like, I don't care if it's a paper straw. It's still a single-use item, right? Just nothing. We take up, but we just went up to Colac and we took a bottle of water with us and we filled it up from the hotel every day. We just made the decision, and we all do it. And if billions can just make that decision, and you've got to work harder for it. But the earth deserves that. Our oceans deserve it. Our rivers deserve it. It's just, I'm so sick of the waste. I'm so sick of seeing human filth every time I'm in a beautiful place. Being up in the Himalayas, I trekked through the Himalayas in 1995, and there was rubbish then. But now it must be just out of control, because so many more people, so much more disposable waste has been dropped, and you can't not see it once you see it. It's
really bizarre. I think it must be terribly bizarre when you're in the Himalayas and you see someone drop it off a boat.
Oh. In a lighter vein, we are still cleaning up all the mess from a few tourists who visited us in '95.
Actually, I was there whenever I was in 2018, I think, or 2000, and I didn't see a lot of rubbish. There were a lot more rubbish bins. What I did see, though, is our Sherpa pick up stuff when he saw something.
Yeah.
And he'd just pick it up and put it in his backpack and just keep walking without even sort of blinking an eyelid. And he was taking care of his office, his workplace, his country. And I really like that. I thought, but that came down to it came down to the people that live there having an awareness of how it all works. Because me as a little boy sitting on the boat flinging the bottle overboard, I didn't know, and it was gone and taken care of. Had it been something that floated, it might have been a different sort of experience. But so Yeah, and then but when I walked down the street the other day, and there was a fair bit of litter just here, which rarely there is. So for me, it was like something must have blown out of a rubbish bin on the back of a little transport vehicle or something, because that was very unusual. But cigarette packets and those sorts of items, I can see that somebody would just drop it, and it's frustrating because it doesn't. A cigarette packet is not really causing you a lot of discomfort. For example, to just carry it up the hill and throw it in the rubbish bin or downhill. So it's very much a selfish mindset to go, well, I don't want this anymore. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
And so it's shifting people away from a very self-centered perspective and into a care for where they live. And then I was wondering, is it the local who lives here that's dropping the item, or is it the transient person who's coming through doing whatever they're doing, who's like, I don't really care about this, I'm doing this piece of work, whether so I was wondering about, and I would love to see some camera footage or something that's, well, I wouldn't love to, that would be boring, but I mean, I'd like somebody else to do the research and sort of say it tends to be this. But I think bringing it all back to where we're at, I mean, the point is about deciding on, we can't fix everything, but what we can do is we can champion something.
Yeah. And take it and control our own contribution.
By example. And lead by example. Yeah.
Yeah. And anything you do, like the sharing about being vegan, but anything that you do, share it. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about the changes that you're making, because you can inspire other people to follow your lead. And so social leadership is a really important quality for the climate fight. But we can do better. Should we move on to our theme for the week?
Yes.
Would you like to do that?
Is it tomorrow already? Yes, we've got 11 minutes.
Skilling and employing people with disabilities. So I don't know if you guys know this. It's actually a topic close to my heart. My father taught adults with intellectual and physical disabilities in my teenage years. So I was always surrounded by these magnificently beautiful human beings with the biggest hearts in the world. In Australia, I think we've been quite progressive as far as this goes. So in primary school, I remember children in our year, rather, they weren't in the institutions anymore. They were more in society. And then in the workforce, they were part of the workforce. I don't know what year it started, but it's always been quite inclusive. But you're doing a lot of work in India. But when I came to Asia in the beginning of this century, I found disability was something still that people were ashamed of, and it was still something, it was hid. And I found that quite I found that quite confronting. Not to not walk down the street and to see nobody with a disability. I found that really unusual. Whereas in India, it's obviously different. It's not so much hiding. It's just the opportunities aren't there. So, Pravin, do you want to share what you've been doing? And
absolutely, the stigma still exists, Andrea. So if there is a person with disability, the lower down the economic strata you go, and if that person is unable to contribute to the economy or revenue of the family, then there is a significant stigma that goes along with it. However, there is so much untapped potential. They are absolutely brilliant when it comes to work. A lot of people have asked, how do you go ahead, train, recruit? I said, we don't need to do that. There are non-profit associations that are investing in skilling. But that is the bane of the people and the associations that marketing is a foreign language. So they do not know how to spread the word and get the message across. How we look at it is we have the schooled and the unschooled. And there are a lot of kids with disabilities where the parents or whoever brings them up goes with that saying, what's the point? Anyway, they're not going to contribute, so why should I invest in schooling and education and all that? And that is where the bulk of the people with disabilities in India come through, right? And the few who clear it, there is a clear government reservation to give jobs to such people in banks and other government institutions that isn't filled up. So Anu and I have been canvassing, and a whole lot of other associations as well. in terms of what can we do? Can we provide skill? Can we look at now? All of us are professional speakers. How many of us have a virtual assistant? Yeah, there is the Tim Wade will jump saying AI, blockchain, etc. But then we still need that physical touch. So why can't we train and hire virtual assistant at the very least who will work 3 to 4 hours a day, but add value? What about desk research? What about putting it together? What about editing this video, mixing and matching, working with the director, either bringing creativity or the cookie cutter approach? Despite the fact that software is going to take over the world, it's not going to happen for another 20, 30 years at least, I hope, which means there is still phenomenal scope. There are hearing impaired people who can help with desk research, email support, etc. Visually challenged people who handle telephones, who fix up appointments and slots. One of them helps me with my outreach program. On the unschooled part, what we are trying to do is, can we get them as a part of a circular economy? Can we, for example, come up with beeswax wraps, teach them how to do it with a hub and spoke model to eliminate plastic? Can we pick up old clothes and convert them into reusable bags? Wacko ideas. Now, I've written a few. There is a company in Bangalore called Miracle Couriers that uses hearing impaired people to do all the couriers, the letters, etc. that comes through. There's another one, Inspiring Ilango, who uses music. He's visually challenged. He uses music as a way to connect and spread the awareness. Just before the lockdown 2 years ago, I was at the NSA Speakers Sales Convention in the US. And the keynote speaker there was Eric Weinmeier. Are you familiar with him? Eric Weinmeier, he's an adventurer. He's climbed the Everest. He's gone through the Grand Canyon rapids. He's done all sorts of crazy things, and he is blind. So if you're looking at a role model globally, then Eric Weinmeier absolutely stands right on top, not allowing his disability or converting that into a positive. He says, because I can't see, my sense of hearing and smell is over amplified. Right? So nothing is impossible here, and all of us are evangelists. We are professional speakers. We go talk and convince folks to do the right thing. What you're doing with the No Show, all three of you. There is knowledge, there is news, and there is also that nudge and motivation and the threat of being killed by sound.
So, hey, Pravin, so what is the problem? What is the challenge that physically disabled people are being marginalized and not employed? Is it a
it's a matching issue, because the corporates who can employ are unable to comprehend the fact that these people can also be top performers. So whenever we try that, they say, oh, but how can he do? His productivity is going to be low. And my answer to that is, this person is not going to, of course, I'm talking about pre-COVID days when we actually used to be, he or she is not going to take a smoke break, not going to spend time in the water cooler. When he or she works, they work for 6 hours, but the productivity will be 8 or 9 hours. So do not count that based on the number of hours that they put in. Look at the outcome, look at the result. And when that logic comes through, automatically a lot of corporates say, yes, I would like to try. And there's another school of thought, Tim, unfortunate but true, that because he or she is visually challenged, I'm only going to pay him half the salary. Right?
Oh, wow.
Work that's going to come is, you have the same targets, you've got the same productivity ratings, then why would you want to discriminate? So these are all challenges that we are trying to come through. But it again comes down to creating an awareness. The people with disabilities have been suppressed so much because of the culture that it's of no use, you can't do anything else, that they are unable to lift their head. The non-profits cannot think beyond manufacturing. So the only thing is, okay, can you go do something with your hands? And the corporates don't know. So that's got to be put together. The government, every successive government makes the right noises, puts the right laws in, but interpretation and implementation of the laws, especially in my country, are still weak. But and it's not just an India problem. Across I'm an entrepreneur, Tim. So are all of you here. That is the opportunity. We don't want attrition. We want people to stay on longer. So we've got to help these people who tend to stay on longer from a sense of loyalty and the fact that, hey, you've helped me out. And at some point, we have to let them loose because there are other companies that can pay a lot higher. But can we act as a catalyst that changes?
Yeah.
That is something that I would look at. And there are enormous jobs that are there. We've just put 100 jobs that come across the matrix of traditional versus knowledge sector, unschooled versus schooled. We didn't call them educated, uneducated. Some are schooled, some are not schooled. But what is it that Indian companies can offer? And I'd love if some of you could have a look at it and extrapolate it. We can work together to see what can the speaking world pick it up from. What jobs can we create? What can we seed? And what I'm talking about here, Tim, is not give them multi-year contract. Can you not give them a 3-month internship? Can you not try that out? And that gives each resource a confidence to go to the next step. Hey, good. So I earned $100 this month. I've done it for 3 months. Can I set myself up to earn $200 as a job or $300 as a job, which is still big money in India, to contribute to a family?
Yeah. I love it. You know, it's just about seeing the full potential in every person, regardless of where they come from, right? So obviously the idea of not even educating people because they're not worth it, it takes away huge amounts of opportunity for them in their future. But like in Australia, you know, I've seen people with disabilities who basically they run the office. You know, they do everything. You know, so these would be the unschooled or not capable of being schooled, but they can run an office. They can make sure all the coffee cups are clean, and they're the happiest people there, and it's a joy. But then, you know, visually and hearing impaired, the technology is there, you know, that they can use. So why, you know, of course, knowledge workers, right? It doesn't take anything away, but I think the issue is cultural in Asia. And I don't know other parts of the world, but like I know in Australia it was, and within my family, right, we're very open-minded. But I think people are still scared to be around people with disability. It makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
And I'm not talking. It's people who speak differently, who look different. You know, so it's not people who struggle with walking. I think visual and hearing impairment, people, they feel embarrassed because they don't know how to communicate, right? So we've got to look at ourselves and say, well, I've got to sort myself out, and then looking at those opportunities, because there's so many things that people can do. And I think Simone de Haas released a video where she was working with some adults with special needs doing some drama.
Right.
Did you see that? It was beautiful, right? They're the most incredible actors. Yeah. But culturally, how do we, and it's come so far, like Singapore for me came a long way in 20 years from when I first got there, where everything was hidden. I remember Lee Kuan Yew's funeral. One of his 2 children, one was albino, grandchildren, which is it a disability? It's a, you know, it doesn't stop them being able to do anything. But the other one was, I can't remember, but they were behind him, and he was the big hide it person, right? Am I getting that wrong, Joe? Tim?
No, I think it was right. It's in like you know, putting up a front that was very much the Singapore way, and you know, I think it reveals something about also the way how society deals with things, because you know, we always talk about how when you actually experience something, then you begin to change your perspective on things. I think that family also went through its own set of exposure to less than perfect ideas, or at least less than ideal situations as far as their sense of story. As you know, I think in terms of when you set out to create something, you create perhaps a version of the story that doesn't include all these challenges, and then when you start to experience them, you go like, oh, okay, I think we can be a bit more amenable about this or that or the other. So what's happened, I think, for Singapore in general is that like for disabilities, more people are experiencing disabilities. More people are out there, and it becomes more something that's more normal to see, and it becomes something that you then have to kind of to deal with. Public transport begins to make accommodations for people with disabilities. Buildings are set out that way, and people begin to learn to do the right thing, because everybody's trying to learn to do the right thing in different circumstances. And then this is a new thing now that you try to learn, right? You try to figure out how to behave around. So it's changing. In Singapore, we've become definitely much more accommodating. And with me, one of my children is in a wheelchair for most of the day, so we have seen how people respond and sometimes don't as well to it. And part of it also is actually what the person wants in the chair. Like for my child, she's not particularly keen for people to give her too much of a leeway because of the wheelchair. I sometimes joke with her and talk about some of the things that happen to her because she gets the 4-wheel discount. And it used to be something that we could joke about, and now it's less funny to her, as in she doesn't want to get the 4-wheel discount anymore, that kind of thing.
All right.
So it's a mix, it's like treat me as normal, but not all the time, that kind of thing.
Still open the door for me. Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
What I'm thinking a lot of it, again, it's the same sort of thing with the throwing the bottle off the boat, in a sense. It's what are you exposed to as you're growing up? Because Andrea, you were talking about what you were exposed to growing up. And I think, Joe, you were explaining, or Pravin, you were explaining how people are learning to learn how to deal with the differences of ability in physical ability in our communities. And then other times it's you kind of take it for granted a little bit. My mum was a physiotherapist. When she moved to Malaysia with my dad, she was considered a trailing spouse. Couldn't get a work permit as a result because she wasn't the one getting the work permit. So she then volunteered her physio services to what was then called the Spastic Center, and which then changed its name, thankfully, to the Multiple Sclerosis Society, and was then worked with the multiple sclerosis patients with multiple sclerosis for the best part of must have been 20 or 30 years, and as far as I can remember, and then and even when they moved back to Australia, continued to work. So we're always surrounded by her friends who were some of her patients that she'd be working with all the time, because this wasn't sort of patients that would come in for a few weeks and leave. This was every day, and they would come in for the mobility, otherwise their joints would stiffen up. And so for the stretching and the mobility and to the movement and pool work and all that sort of stuff. So in one sense, for me, it's been kind of, and then I had a CEO who was blind in one organization. It was a blind organization, so that kind of made sense. And it was a radio station for blind people, and I was reading the news for blind people to have the full news and not just the full articles from the newspaper and not just the edited news from the radio station, which I thought was great. So I guess my point of all of that is if we've been surrounded by the differences in physical ability, it kind of changes it. But if you haven't been surrounded by it, it can be an affront to your own sense of how to handle the situation or the people in front of you, which is actually should be a learning opportunity for self. But sometimes, and what I was trying to think of earlier, Pravin, when you were explaining the situation with organizations going, oh, I don't know if they'll be able to do the work. I was trying to think, why would a boss make that call? And I think what they're thinking is, we're going to have to take care of this person.
Right.
And so as a result, we're going to have to change the way that we do a lot of the things that we do to accommodate this person. So if we don't bring this person in, we don't have to change that. And so it's easier for us to come up with some other nonsense excuse or rationale that seems to have some sort of legitimacy, rather than the fact that we have to put ramps in and handles and be a bit more mindful of the boxes we leave around everywhere and all of that, whatever it is, whatever the thing is. And so it's or our sort of banter or movie nights. And how are they going to be involved in movie night? Well, you ask them.
Yeah, exactly.
They're happy to turn up to movie night. Yeah. I mean, they might go, now what's happening all the time, and you go, okay, you can't do that, mate. But you know what I mean. So it's
we have to work harder. We always have to work harder to change the things that matter, and most people aren't willing to work harder. You know, like 80% of people who apply to speak at the professional speakers events are men. So every time someone comes in and they say, you know, because I was involved in so many, what's your advice? I said, work harder to recruit females. You have to work harder for it. That's just the way it is. But something like this, you just got to work harder for it. And also, I think, you know, when you feel uncomfortable, you got to think about that, you know.
Yep. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I think that's real. So why? Because I think this is a really important point.
Because that's about you. It's not about them. You know, like one of my tests was always to take my boyfriends, and I think Steve was visited my dad's work on my dad's retirement week, right? And so when I go in, I mean, these guys have known me for 20, 30 years, and all of the guys wanted to marry me, right? And they're brilliant. I used to just giggle so much. And so a bit of a test for the boyfriends is like, come and see my dad at work, and how they coped with it. And they just couldn't cope with it because it was like, oh, you know. And I'm like, no, come on, these are awesome humans. Like, these amazing people. They're, you know, they're so affectionate. They're so honest. They're so open. No one lies in this place. You know, they're incapable of lying. Just be open to it, you know, and address that. But I do think in Australia, we did get onto this earlier than most countries, and that integration within society, because the exposure is what you need. They're not scary. My boys went from a young age. I remember the first time they saw a young lad with spina bifida, really, really freaked them out, because it's a pretty full-on sort of physical sort of experience for a kid in a wheelchair, right? Yeah. So for a little child seeing that for the first time, and I just constantly was just talking to them about it and trying to help them understand what they were seeing, because, you know, a person with spina bifida has a bright brain. Their body just doesn't cooperate, right? And so we've just got to work hard. It's important because we're missing beauty, and it's beauty at the center of our societies, and it's honest and it's loving and it's open, and I think they're magnificent. All of my experiences, magnificent, and I make them part of our world. It makes us all kinder.
Absolutely. It's they're looking for empathy, not sympathy.
Yes.
And a little bit of empathy can go a long way. Tim, continuing from what you said, one of the positives of COVID is it is now possible to work with somebody or provide work to somebody without sharing physical space with them. So a bunch of the awkwardness gets off that, hey, this is the work to be done. You know how it is. And when that comes back, you know, that kind of eases.
I think that's brilliant. And I think it just removes the barrier. And also, you know, if it's over Zoom or whatever else, you know, and I think there's a great opportunity. So it's almost like you're in the right place at the right time for this one, because the world is more open now to shipping work around all over the place. And if teams of people can get together and go, you know, what are we passionate about doing, and what can I do better than Lot?
Right.
You know, it's that. And just because this is not happening, it doesn't mean I can't do this better than everybody else. You know? Yeah. So the challenge then comes down to that. What were you calling it? Unschooled versus schooled. So that those people who haven't had the opportunity to be given a skill in something or whatever it is, and that's the one that's, for me, that's the more pressing need. The other one is about innovation. Sure, it's about tolerant, not even tolerant. It's about understanding how, like Andrew was saying, we just got to do things better. But then I guess it's I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud here, but it's one of those things where Joe was sort of sharing the idea of I don't want to be treated any differently.
Right.
And yet, in a sense, your call right now, what you're asking for is for people to look for ways. You want people to behave differently. So I don't want to be treated differently, but I need you to behave differently.
Right.
So that you don't treat me as different, but as a valued member of your workforce or potential candidate for your team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your idea about look at the results, what are you looking for here? Because I can produce these results. I think there's an opportunity for entrepreneurs actually to create communities of workers that can deliver fantastic results for organizations.
Right.
And to harness this talent pool, which is why I said the challenge is those unschooled people. But it can't just be about setting up, an institution that does this work, and we've got a lot of blind people working there, or whatever the thing is. It's got to be like Andrea was saying, in Australia, there's a lot more normalization, I suppose, by the fact that they're just part of the community, and that's normal. It's not abnormal. It's normal. It's it's normal that a percentage of people are going to be in this situation, and they can still do amazing things. So we've got a member of APSS. Actually, she's out of Australia, and she's blind, but she's doing keynotes and training programs and appearing on podcasts and writing books and doing all this sort of stuff, and is amazing.
She's amazing. Amanda Hill.
She'll respond to you, and you post stuff on Facebook. She's responding, and all the equipment's there. So that's Amanda. So she's,
and that's why you should always capitalize your hashtags, because for the visually impaired, they can read the capitals. So if you've got 2 words in a hashtag, you capitalize the second one. But I think being open. Being open to other opportunities, but we always have to remember that this goes back to our primal brains and our unwillingness to accept a difference. Goes back. It's a primal thing, right? And but overcoming that is about humans raising their consciousness from the times when a disabled child was left out to die, is in history. But that history is not that old.
Oh no, it still happens here. Happens here.
Well, they just terminate them now, right?
Yeah.
So, but being open to helping. And by the way, Pravin, if you've got somebody who's got great video editing skills, I'd love to meet them.
Oh, sure.
I'd be very happy to support someone. So
sounds
something
good.
I'm really useless at.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that.
Pravin, what do you have? Do you have an employment service, or are you working with people that are running employment agencies or trying to place people?
So this started in 2010. My wife Anu is a social worker, turned social entrepreneur, and for my main company, we needed somebody to make calls. So 2010, we had 2 visually challenged people come in. It was a standard script, market research calls, not the pesky sales calls or anything else, to interview, to profile, to fix up appointments and the like. And that was the support center. And in 2 years, that team had grown bigger than the regular core team. And that's when Anu decided that, hey, there is a bigger market. We can skill and provide employment to a lot more people. And the entire startup community in my city of Chennai jumped in, saying, I would like to support 1, I'd like to support 2. And this became a corporate social initiative from my main entity. I think in the last 8-9 years, we have skilled and provided employment to about 73 people. And COVID put paid to that, because that was the only division working with PCs. The rest of the company was in laptops, so it could go. And you also need to factor in that these visually challenged hearing impaired people from a very economical background, moving into a city, a room of this size, 10 people will be staying. So it is physically impossible for me to send the table and a PC to set it up in their house because there's just not enough space. So thankfully, with cloud and refurbishing older laptops, it's moved on. But COVID has also, we had to pivot. So what we have now done is, can we now look at skilling and providing employment to 100 people with disabilities for this year? We're currently at 12, and we still have 10 more months to go, where we work with the nonprofits to skill and place these people. Obviously, there's no commercials involved. We just want more corporates to get sensitized, to start looking at. So we receive the requests from the corporates and then figure out the nonprofits, shortlist the people, get the skilling and training done, and then look at placing them on. Most of which still happens remotely. So that's, Tim, what we have been working on. Now it's become a whole lot bigger mission, where we have an entity called Can Do, which is a placement service for skilling and placing people with disabilities schooled. And we have a nonprofit trust that is skilling and trying to train and create solopreneurs so they can sit at their house and then do whatever is necessary on a table without movement, and then ship it across. So that's still a work in progress. This has been on for 10, 11 years now. And that's a quest that we want. There are several people who are doing similar stuff. There's a large BPO in Bangalore employing 100 visually challenged people. There's Miracle Couriers, as I said. It's happening, but nobody's talking about it. So we are in the process of bringing everybody in, creating that empathy and awareness through all of you, because if each of you commit to evaluate and provide skilled employment to a deserving candidate, even for 1 month or 2 months, that's still a major fillip for each of them.
Yes.
And
Well,
with all
I'll
you
wait till
folks,
Andrea's editor to get passes the test.
No, I'm very happy. I mean, it's just, yeah, you know, I love you, Pravin, but every time I hear you speak, I love you more. It's just beautiful what you're doing, and that's what it takes. You know, it takes that focus, dedication, and commitment. And just hats off to you and your family for doing it.
But a lot of people here are doing. Yesterday, I met an entrepreneur. It was a networking meet. We've started face-to-face meetings, so it's one-on-one still. But she and her husband are doing it for rural women. You might have seen ladies wearing a red dot here. There are several connotations to it. I go with my grandfather, who was the most practical person. He's saying those are herbs, and that is something that is supposed to ward off, create more immunity. And you'd be surprised that US has gone and patented that particular herb for creating immunity. But this has been something that's going on, that they have got rural women to use natural organic herbs and whatever these roots are to create that red dot that goes through. It's another matter that it's been taken on as different meanings and other parts or forms of thoughts of subjugation or whatever. But I'm getting down to the basics as to why do we do that. But there are several small families that are into it and not talking about it. And I had a ban, Andrea, from my wife that I can't talk about all the good work because you keep your marketing to the business end of the things. But the pandemic has shown that we will need to go ahead and talk and get a lot more into the fold.
Absolutely.
And that's why we've stepped on it. But every little helps. And when people ask me, do you have a selfish reason? I said, yeah, selfish reason called karma. So
I have a solution for you, Pravin.
Yes.
You need more vegans.
That's the full quote from this show, by the way.
Tim, I've hired a hitman on this very show to kill all the non-vegans.
I feel sorry for the vegans.
Glad I missed that bit. Yeah.
All right, so I probably should head towards wrapping up.
Yes.
Joe, you had a salacious piece. What was it?
Well, no, it was just a story that I came across the other day about a massage parlor, which massage parlor is the wrong word for it. It's a health spa was what they called it.
That's where Tim was for the first hour of the no show.
And what happened at the health spa was I don't know, have you been around Chinese New Year in Singapore, and I'm sure in other parts of the world as well. When you're gonna have a haircut just before Chinese New Year, the 2 weeks or a month before that, you get the charge where you have to pay extra, right? Because you're for the haircut, same service, everything. No tipping in Singapore, but we'll just make it official. We'll just make it an official policy, right? For the month leading up to it.
Joe, you might have to explain to Pravin what a haircut is.
So there was a story of something similar happening in the massage parlor in this health spa. But what happened was a little bit different. A young gentleman had got in there for a regular massage, and he had additional services sort of pressed upon him by the lady who was doing the massage, and pressured him into receiving some manual manipulation, right? It was not
Well said.
not by his request, but after some pressure, he succumbed to it. But
no pun intended.
The funny thing about the quote is because it became a police case, and in the report it was one of those things where no regular massages were being offered because of the Chinese New Year period. So he couldn't just have the normal massage; he had to have the special because it was Chinese New Year. So it was one of those great stories.
So who did he press charges?
No, he reported. I mean, he made a report. Apparently, the two people.
I'm outraged. I'm very happy right now, but outraged.
So two people were quite upset of being forced into it. Apparently, there was a very aggressive salesperson, and it was the woman herself coming in, topless to promote her services. It's a very complicated story because they tell this story, and then in the same article, they just talk about how so and so is now charged with allowing his mother to be giving massages without a license. And I go like, there's just so much on this particular story.
You're gonna have to send that. I'll have to add it to the weekend reads.
And it's in Singapore as well. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like a bad sitcom.
Well, is it? So it's obviously time for a happy ending. So anything else you guys want to add?
No, just spread smiles, spread love, and more hugs when Matthews meet Joe Augustin.
Nice.
What have you been watching?
There could have been a lot. So I'm going to start. So I obviously finished Schitt's Creek. Okay, very emotional final episode. Thank you for pushing me forward. But if you're not listening to it, I would suggest every now and again, check out the New Yorker podcast. So it's based on the New Yorker magazine. They're usually pretty short. And every now and again, there's a really interesting one on China and the games, but also from a political perspective. But I sort of dip in and out of that one every now and again. It's pretty interesting. Have you guys ever had a listen?
No.
No.
All right. Who's next? This is what keeps you distracted. So it's beyond the news.
I'm in love with the Will Smith 6-episode series of National Geographic titled Earth, where he travels across every episode with one expert. Absolutely fabulous. Now it's a family affair that we wait and see because there are only 6 episodes. We watch it together. I would strongly recommend it for us to know the miracles that are there in our world that we weren't even aware of before. So he jumps into
where can you watch it?
Nat Geo has it. It's called Earth.
It's still a preview for that, where he's underwater in a submarine saying, "I'm going to put that in a movie." That's amazing.
It's really nice. And
Yeah.
Will Smith was Will Smith. So
Yeah.
when a shot was taken with the tiger sharks in, but he was not in the water, the photographer takes it and he asks, I hope I did not look scared. Show me as somebody picked. So he was just being him. And it was very nice. The way it has been directed. My daughter still prefers the Attenborough to Will Smith, but Will has done a great job. So.
Attenborough is a better narrator, I felt, than Will. Will needs to work in his narration voice.
Yeah, but he was the guest
underwater, looking at Will Smith being scared.
All right, good one to check out. Tim?
No, I'll defer to Joe while I think of another one.
Well, it's a show you don't have to see because the story can be found online. But I watched Tinder Swindler on Netflix. Quite an interesting story about a guy who goes out there, of course, to con women into an amorous affair. It's a real great example of go big or go home, right? And just you have to just get. I'd recommend watching it at 1.5 speed. Don't waste that much of your bandwidth, your mental bandwidth on it. But it's just the plot's pretty spectacular. It's pretty amazing what happens. I won't spoiler too much of it, but I'll tell you that the first half is a little slow, and then it ramps up. And when it gets to the end, you just can't believe that that's the end, because what happens beyond that is almost as unbelievable.
Okay.
There's a theme here, Joe. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Murdering philanderer.
With your favorite watches and your amusing reads. Okay.
It led me to another thing which I wanted to show you. Just talk about a very short time. You know how Shonda Rhimes has got Shondaland, right? And I think it's fair to say that if you talk about who you might look as a kind of rival for attention in the same space for writer, TV series creator, Aaron Sorkin might come to mind. So Shondaland has just released a series on Netflix, and it's called Inventing Anna, and the lead character's name is Anna Sorokin. So go and so chew on that. Anna Sorokin is a con artist. And I just thought it was a little bit of tongue-in-cheek fun, perhaps, or maybe a little bit of a dig.
Okay,
interesting.
I just noticed somebody's been commenting on LinkedIn that giving you a big props, Pravin, saying clearly shows how empathetic he is. Lovely move, Pravin. All the best to you and your team. So I'll be able to see that when we get off. Who's that's from? Nice.
Was it you, Pravin?
Oh.
So I was just joking. So that was my lack of empathy.
So no distractions for you then, Tim.
You know, well, if it wasn't memorable enough to call to mind right now, but I don't think so. I don't think so.
All right. Well, we've had a longer show yet.
That's another distraction I would strongly recommend. I just love the book.
Okay.
Draw and Win.
Well, that's been Manchester United's philosophy, sadly, and they're not winning. They are drawing everything. But I don't know how it works. It just doesn't logically make any sense to me.
All right, guys, time to say goodbye. This is our longest show yet, but of course we've got the wonderful Pravin. So thank you so much for joining us. Next week we've got Lindsay Adams. So that should be fun too. I don't know what the theme is yet, but we'll work it out. But really appreciate having you here.
Super.
And sharing and being part of it. And hopefully you'll come back and visit us again. And Tim and Joe, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
More than usual for some reason. Okay. See you all. Bye.
All right. Bye.
I'm trying to remember.